Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking all about facilities management,
Yeah.
which is something that, I don't know, for me it's always kind of seems like, oh, it's just about the buildings, but this book, Quantum Leap Facility Management, really flips that whole idea on its head.
Yeah, for sure.
Really what we're talking about is people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the book is it's written for facility managers who are working in that fast-paced startup world.
Right.
But so many of these ideas, I think, can really be applied to any workplace.
Absolutely.
Even if you aren't in, Silicon Valley, and even if you aren't, working at some, crazy fast-paced company.
Yeah, totally.
So what was really interesting to me was right at the beginning of the book, the author talks about his own experience starting out as a facility manager in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And he gives this advice that at first seems kind of counterintuitive.
Okay.
He actually advises new facility managers to focus on blending in
Oh, interesting.
and building relationships before they try to make any big changes.
Really?
Kind of the opposite of what you think you'd want to do.
Yeah, you would think you'd want to come in guns blazing, like make a big splash, show that you're there to make changes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You'd think so, right?
Yep.
But he makes the case that startups in particular, they just move so fast
Uh-huh.
that quick fixes really just don't work.
Right.
And so it's about first building trust,
Yeah.
really understanding the company culture.
Right.
And then from there, you can start to kind of envision those longer-term solutions.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and he even uses this analogy of a ship captain,
Okay.
where the captain is responsible for every single aspect of the ship, from navigation to the well-being of the crew.
Right.
And the author says that's the kind of commitment that facilities managers need to have.
Interesting.
This like going all in commitment.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really recognizing that every task matters, no matter how small. It could be fixing a leaky faucet. It could be, planning a complete office redesign.
Yeah.
But you're contributing to this overall success of the company.
Yep.
It's kind of like being the unsung hero.
Uh-huh.
Working behind the scenes to just keep everything running smoothly.
Yeah.
So no task is beneath you.
Right.
It's about the long game,
Okay.
not the quick fixes.
Yeah.
But here's where I thought it got really interesting.
Oh.
The book introduces this idea that firsts are the worst.
Interesting.
So basically what the author is saying is that initial solutions are very rarely the best.
Huh. What do you think about that?
Well, it made me think about the tech industry.
Okay.
You know how there are always new updates, improvements, new versions of things being released?
Right. Constantly evolving.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like facility management should be the same way, right?
Yeah, totally. You're not just, fixing a problem and that's it. It's like you're constantly looking for ways to improve, to do it even better, even if things seem fine right now. There's always a better way to do it.
So it's like you're playing this game of chess
Uh-huh.
where you're always thinking several moves ahead.
Right.
You're anticipating what the challenges might be.
Yeah.
And you're trying to come up with solutions that don't just address the immediate problem,
Mm-hmm.
but they actually make the whole system better.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to think big picture.
And that ties in with this other point that he makes about these force multipliers, right?
Yes.
So can you explain what a force multiplier is?
So force multiplier is basically anything that has this ripple effect across the whole organization. So for example, let's say you implement a new software system
Okay.
to manage maintenance requests.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does this make your job as a facilities manager easier,
Right.
but it also improves communication, it reduces downtime, it makes everyone happier, and that is a force multiplier.
I love that. It's like this chain reaction
Yeah.
of positive outcomes.
Right.
It really makes you realize that everything in an organization is so interconnected and that the decisions made by facility managers
Yeah,
can have this much wider impact than we might realize.
absolutely. And that's why it's so important for facility managers to really be strategic
Yeah.
in how they think about those things.
And the book also talks about understanding the 6 human needs
Yeah.
and how they play out in the workplace. So I think it would be helpful to actually list out what those 6 needs are.
Sure. So the ones that the author talks about are certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, and contribution.
Okay.
And the thing that I find so fascinating is that he actually makes the case that facility managers can have an influence on these needs through the spaces that they create and manage.
I mean, he actually says, he goes so far as to say, that well-designed workspaces can actually contribute to the triumphant melodies of organizational success.
Wow.
That's quite a statement.
It is. So how do you think they could do that?
Well, I mean, think about it. If you have a workspace that's chaotic and unpredictable,
Yeah.
it's going to create a sense of anxiety,
Right.
uncertainty among the people who work there.
Makes sense.
But if you create a space that feels organized, efficient, even inspiring,
Yeah.
people are going to feel more certain and more secure, which can then free them up
Yeah.
to be more productive and more creative.
I like that.
So it's not just about aesthetics.
Uh-huh.
It's about creating this environment that actually supports the psychological and emotional well-being
Yeah.
of the people working there.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
And that can have an impact on everything.
Right.
From morale to the bottom line.
Exactly. And speaking of getting to the bottom of things,
Yeah.
the book talks about this problem-solving tool
Right.
called the fishbone diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through how that works?
Sure. So imagine you're drawing a fish skeleton.
Okay.
The head of the fish
Yeah.
represents the problem you're trying to solve.
Okay.
And then you have these main bones that are branching out from the spine.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those bones represents a major category of potential causes for the problem.
So, for example, if the problem is low employee morale,
Right.
those main bones might be things like the work environment, management style, compensation, workload.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then branching off from those main bones, you have smaller bones.
Okay.
And those represent more specific factors within each category.
Got it. So under work environment, for example,
Uh-huh.
it might be things like lack of natural light, uncomfortable furniture,
Right.
poor air quality.
Exactly.
So you're really breaking down the problem in this very visual way.
Yeah.
And you start to see how all these different factors
Right.
are interconnected.
Absolutely.
And it gives you a much clearer picture of what might be contributing to the problem.
It's like you're a detective, you know?
Yeah.
You're putting together the clues.
Yeah, it's like creating a map of the problem.
Exactly.
So you're not just treating the victims.
We're getting to the root cause.
Totally.
And that's where those force multipliers come in, right?
Right.
You can start brainstorming those really effective solutions that are going to have that ripple effect.
Right.
And create that positive change across the entire organization.
I like that.
The book also talks about the importance of continuous learning,
Yeah.
professional development
For sure.
for facility managers.
Yeah.
And he makes this great point that this field, it's constantly evolving.
Right.
Like there are always new technologies,
Right.
new sustainability practices, new ways of thinking about workspaces.
Yeah.
It's a really dynamic field.
Right.
And you've got to stay ahead of the curve
Absolutely.
if you really want to excel.
Yeah.
And he also makes this really key distinction between working in the facility
Okay.
versus working on the facility.
Oh, interesting. Tell me about that.
So working in is like all those day-to-day tasks.
Making sure the lights are working, the bathrooms are clean, all that stuff.
Right.
Whereas working on the facility is about stepping back,
Yeah,
thinking strategically about how you can improve the facility as a whole.
that makes sense.
So working in is like being the mechanic,
Yeah.
Keeping the engine running.
Right.
Whereas working on is like being an engineer,
Uh-huh.
designing a better engine.
I like that.
And it's important to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
You can't be so bogged down in the day-to-day that you never have time to think about the bigger picture.
Makes sense.
And that kind of brings us back to that ship captain analogy, right?
Right, yeah.
The captain has to focus on steering the ship,
Uh-huh.
but they also need to be thinking about,
Yeah.
long-term maintenance and upgrades
Right.
to keep that whole ship running smoothly.
Totally.
And one of the things that's so important for a facility manager, just like for a ship captain, is clear and timely communication.
Absolutely.
And he has this great line, "Speak now or forever hold your peace."
Wow.
It sounds a little dramatic,
It does.
but it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, it does.
especially in this fast-paced environment. If you see a problem or you have an idea,
Right.
you need to voice it
Yeah.
promptly.
Right.
If you wait,
Yeah.
you can miss opportunities.
Right.
Small problems can become big problems.
Huh.
It's like that whole see something, say something approach,
Totally, yeah.
but applied to facility management.
I like that.
And speaking of, addressing things early on,
Yeah.
the book talks about this concept of marginal gains and losses.
Interesting. Tell me more about that.
So it's the idea that these small incremental changes can actually have this huge cumulative impact
Right.
over time.
Yeah.
And I think this applies to so many areas of life, right?
Yeah, I
Not just
see that.
facility management,
Yeah.
but even, in our own personal lives.
Right.
You know those small changes to our daily habits?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's getting a little bit more sleep or drinking more water,
Right.
like those things can add up to significant improvements
Absolutely.
in our health and well-being.
That's totally.
And then in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
those seemingly minor adjustments
Right.
can actually have a big impact
Yeah.
on efficiency and productivity.
Yeah.
So things like optimizing parking, streamlining how you allocate resources,
Uh-huh.
addressing those minor maintenance issues before they turn into major headaches.
Right.
It's all about those little tweaks that when you add them all together,
Right.
it can create this huge positive shift.
It's like that saying, take care of the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves.
Exactly. And he also talks about perception in the book.
Oh, interesting.
You know how your actions are perceived by others?
Right.
He uses this phrase, what you see is what you get. Okay.
Can you kind of unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. So it's about being really mindful of how other people see your decisions and actions, especially the timing of those actions. He actually gives a really interesting example in the book.
Okay.
Conducting a fire drill during a super important meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So, of course, safety is super important.
Right.
But if you do something like that at a time when everyone's really focused on something else,
Yeah.
it can make you seem insensitive to the priorities of the team,
Uh-huh.
and people might question your judgment.
So it's not just about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's also about doing it at the right time
Yeah,
in a way that's going to be perceived correctly.
absolutely.
Now, this next concept, I have to admit,
Yeah.
when I read it, I was like, huh,
Okay.
this is a little bit counterintuitive.
Okay.
It's it all pays the same philosophy.
Oh, that's a good one.
So can you break that down for us? Yeah, so it's about focusing on results. Not getting hung up on your own personal preferences or rigid principles.
Okay.
Because especially in this kind of work, there can be a lot of internal politics.
Right.
So sometimes you need to be flexible,
Mm-hmm.
adaptable
Yeah.
to really achieve that best result,
Okay.
even if it means, going a little bit outside your comfort zone.
So it's being pragmatic
Right.
and understanding that ultimately.
Yeah.
The goal is to get the job done effectively,
Yeah.
even if it means compromising a little bit on, how you would prefer to do things.
Exactly. Putting the organization's needs above your own, ego or personal preferences.
And speaking of putting the needs of the organization first,
Yeah.
the book has some pretty strong words about recognizing when it's time to abandon certain projects or initiatives that have become unproductive.
Right.
And he uses this really, I don't know, it's kind of a blunt analogy, but it's effective. He says, don't work for a dead horse. So it's a powerful image.
It is.
It's about knowing when to cut your losses and move on,
Right.
rather than pouring more time and energy
Yeah.
into something that's just not going anywhere.
Totally.
And I think that can be really tough
Mm-hmm.
to let go, especially if you've invested a lot in something.
Right.
But sometimes you just have to be realistic and recognize when it's time to change course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a really valuable skill to have as a leader.
I think this next concept was one that really resonated with me.
Okay.
And it's this danger of focusing too much on appearances
Uh-huh.
or creating an illusion of success.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he makes a good point. I think it's easy to get caught up in trying to, make things look good on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
But that real lasting success, it comes from, having that substance,
Right.
not just a shiny facade.
Exactly.
And if you're more concerned with creating an illusion of progress
Right.
than with actually achieving results,
Mhm.
you're really doing yourself and the organization a disservice.
So it's about being authentic,
Yeah.
focusing on real results,
Right.
not being afraid to acknowledge those challenges that come up along the way.
Absolutely.
And speaking of avoiding challenges,
Mhm.
the author really stresses the importance of prototyping and testing new ideas and solutions
Right.
before you roll them out on a larger scale.
Makes sense.
It's kind of like if you were building a new product,
Yeah.
you wouldn't just release it to the market
Right.
without first creating a prototype and testing it thoroughly.
Absolutely.
And the same principle applies to facilities management.
Totally. Yeah.
So you want to make sure your solutions are well thought out,
Right.
they're effective
Yeah.
before you implement them company-wide.
Makes sense.
So you're being proactive.
Mhm.
You're minimizing risks.
Well,
You're not just jumping in head first,
yeah.
hoping for the best.
Right.
Now, this next principle, I have to admit, when I first read it, I thought, this is a little bit counterintuitive.
Okay.
It's called, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is.
Oh, I like that one.
I mean, it sounds like a recipe for creating problems
It does, right?
where none exist.
Yeah.
But I think what he's really getting at here is this mindset
Yeah.
of continuous improvement.
Right.
So it's acknowledging that even if something is working fine,
Yeah.
there's always room for improvement,
For sure.
optimization.
Right.
You can always make things even better.
Right.
So you're not settling for the status quo.
Right.
You're always pushing yourself to do better,
To innovate.
to innovate,
Yeah.
to find new and better ways of doing things.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive, not just waiting for things to break down before you address them.
Exactly. And speaking of breaking things down,
Yeah.
I want to go back to that fishbone diagram that you mentioned earlier.
Right?
Can you just remind us how that works?
Yeah. So it's this visual way of breaking down a complex problem
Okay.
to try and understand the root causes.
Right.
So you're drawing this fish skeleton.
Yeah.
The head of the fish represents the problem you're trying to solve.
Okay.
Those main bones branching out from the spine, they represent the major categories of causes for the problem.
Okay.
And then branching off from those main bones, you have smaller bones that represent the more specific factors.
So just to use that example again of low employee morale,
Right.
the main bones might be things like work environment, management style, compensation, workload,
Exactly.
and then the smaller bones branching off from those main bones
Yeah.
might include things like lack of natural light, uncomfortable furniture, under work environment,
Right.
lack of recognition, unclear expectations,
Yeah.
under management style.
Exactly. So you're getting more and more specific as you go down the
So
fishbone.
you're really breaking it down
Yeah.
visually, and you can see all the connections
Right.
between those different factors.
Absolutely. It helps you to get this really clear picture of what might be contributing to the problem.
It's like creating this map of the problem.
Exactly.
And then once you understand the root cause,
Yeah.
you can start to brainstorm those really effective solutions, those force multipliers
That's
that
the
are going to ripple out
Yeah.
and create that positive change throughout the organization.
With a domino effect.
Exactly. And he has this really kind of funny phrase
Okay.
that he uses for facility managers.
Okay.
He says, "You don't know Jack."
Oh, wow.
And at first I thought, oh, that's a little harsh.
Yeah, that's kind of blunt.
But what he's really getting at, I think, is that no matter how much you know,
Yeah.
there's always more to learn.
Absolutely.
So it's about having that intellectual humility,
Uh-huh.
that willingness to keep learning and growing,
Yeah.
no matter how much experience you have under your belt.
It's a good reminder.
And speaking of learning and growing, he
Yeah.
talks about the importance of having this voracious reading habit
Right.
for facility managers.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's about staying informed, expanding your knowledge, constantly seeking out those new ideas and perspectives,
Yeah.
which makes sense in a field like facility management
Right.
because things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
You need to be a lifelong learner
Right.
to really stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. He even says that the voracious reader becomes this more informed decision maker
Right.
and visionary leader.
Exactly. Because the more you read,
Yeah.
the more you learn,
Uh-huh.
the better equipped you are
Right.
to make those strategic decisions.
Yeah.
That can have such a big impact on the whole organization.
Totally. And it's not just about the technical stuff either.
Okay.
He really emphasizes the importance of ethics
Right.
in facilities management.
Which makes sense. I mean, you're dealing with budgets, contractors, a lot of sensitive information, right? So being ethical is essential.
And he really stresses that ethics is not just some moral obligation.
Right.
It's a strategic imperative.
Interesting.
Yeah. So ethical facilities managers, they build trust. They build credibility,
Okay.
which is essential for creating that positive and productive work environment.
So it's not just about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding that ethical behavior is actually good for business.
It is.
Exactly. And speaking of good business practices,
Yeah.
let's move on to the topic of communication.
Okay. Yeah. And, communication is so important in any field, really, but I think especially in facilities management,
For sure.
where you're interacting with all these different stakeholders,
Right.
different personalities, different departments, and you're kind of that bridge between.
It's like when you see those diagrams of, like
Right.
the facility managers right in the center with
Uh-huh.
lines connecting to like the CEO and then all the way down to like
The cleaning crew.
yeah, the cleaning crew. Exactly.
Wow.
You're interacting with everyone.
Everyone, yeah. And that's why he has this great, I don't know if it's advice or just a statement,
Yeah, okay.
but it's speak the facts up front, which he shortens to STFU.
I have to admit, when I read that, I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I get it.
a little cheeky.
But it gets the point across.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder to just cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Cut through the noise,
Yeah.
be direct, be clear, present the facts,
Right.
and don't, add a bunch of drama or embellishment.
So it's assertive,
Yeah.
but it's also respectful.
Right.
You're not trying to be aggressive or, step on anyone's toes.
Exactly. It's about being heard, but doing it in a respectful way.
Right. And he also talks about being prepared for those potentially challenging situations
Yeah.
with contingency planning, which I think is so important, not just in facility management, but in life in general.
Absolutely.
It's that idea of hoping for the best,
Yeah.
but preparing for the worst.
Right.
So having those what-if scenarios in mind and having plans in place so that if those things happen,
Yeah.
you're ready.
You're not caught off guard.
Yeah, he uses that analogy of the fire extinguisher.
Right.
You hope you never have to use it, but you're sure glad it's there if you need it.
Totally. And, speaking of being prepared, he also talks about this really fascinating thing called the pain-pleasure principle.
Okay. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah. So the idea is that people are generally motivated to avoid pain and seek pleasure.
Makes sense.
Right. So if you want to motivate someone to take action, you can actually frame things in terms of the potential pain of inaction
Oh,
for the
boy.
pleasure of success.
So instead of just saying, we need to implement this new safety protocol, you could say, if we don't implement this protocol, we risk putting our employees in danger. But if we do implement it, we'll create a safer, more secure work environment for everybody.
Exactly. You're connecting it to, what they care about,
Right.
their well-being.
So you're appealing to their desire to avoid that pain of, potential danger,
Uh-huh.
but also to, seek out that pleasure of having a safe and secure environment.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it's powerful.
It's a good way to kind of nudge people in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of influence, he also uses this phrase, play for the name on the front, not the back.
Okay, I like that one, but break it down for me. What does that actually mean in practice?
So it's about putting the team's success ahead of any individual recognition.
Okay.
It's about being a team player.
Right.
Recognizing that everyone's contributions are important and focusing on that collective good rather than, trying to do all the glory for yourself.
It's that we're all in this together mentality, not a me first attitude.
Yeah. And that really helps to build trust and camaraderie within a team, which we know is essential for success.
And he actually spends a whole chapter talking about the importance of cultivating that trust within a team.
Yes, trust is everything. It's the foundation
Right.
of a high-performing team. When people trust each other, they communicate more openly, they collaborate more effectively, they support each other,
Right.
and ultimately they achieve much better results.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Yes.
The trust leads to better communication, which leads to better results, which reinforces that trust.
Absolutely. And he also emphasizes the importance of maintaining professional boundaries,
Right.
even within a close-knit team.
He has that line, people at work are allies, not your friends or family.
Yeah, which might sound a little harsh at first.
It does a little bit.
But it's a good reminder that professional relationships are different from personal relationships.
Right.
You want to be friendly and supportive. But you also need to maintain those boundaries so you can make decisions that are in the best interest of the organization.
Not based on personal feelings.
Exactly.
So you can be friendly,
Yeah,
but professional.
absolutely. And that leads us to his advice on managing relationships with vendors, which is another really key aspect of facility management.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you're dealing with vendors for everything from office supplies to major renovation.
Everything. Right. And it's a delicate balance.
It is.
You want to get the best possible deals for your company,
Right.
but you also want to maintain those good relationships.
Right, because you need those vendors.
Exactly. He talks about finding that win-win scenario where both parties benefit from the relationship.
He uses that analogy of a dance.
Yeah.
You need to be able to negotiate effectively,
Uh-huh.
push for what you want,
Right.
but also be respectful of your partner.
Exactly. It's about building those long-term, mutually beneficial relationships based on trust and respect.
Okay, so now let's talk about managing people, because he introduces this really interesting framework in the book called will, won't, can, can't.
Yes, love this one. It's so helpful for understanding the different motivations and capabilities of your team members.
Okay, so break that down for me. What does that actually mean? Will, won't, can, can't.
So will refers to someone who is motivated and wants to do the job. Won't refers to someone who lacks that motivation.
Okay.
Can means they have the skills and abilities to do the job, and
Oh.
can't means they lack those necessary skills.
So ideally, you want someone who is will and can.
Yes, you're a superstar.
Right. They're both motivated and capable.
Give them the resources and support they need, and they will excel.
But then you might have someone who is won't but can. So they have the skills, but maybe they're just not that motivated.
Right, and that's where your leadership skills come in.
Okay.
You have to find ways to inspire them, to engage them.
And then you might have the opposite will, but can't. So they're eager,
Yes,
but they just don't have the skills yet.
right. So that's where training and development come into play.
And then, of course, the most challenging is the won't and can't.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
They lack both the motivation and the skills.
Right, and that requires a lot of careful thought and consideration. What's the best approach for this person?
It's like this puzzle of figuring out what makes each person tick.
It is, and it's so rewarding when you see people grow and succeed.
So we've talked about teamwork, we've talked about, managing people, but then he also talks about the importance of being strategically visible.
Yes, love that one too.
So what does that mean, being strategically visible?
So it's about making sure that your contributions are recognized and appreciated.
Okay.
You don't want to just blend into the background. You want to be proactive in communicating your accomplishments and demonstrating your value to the organization.
So it's finding that balance between being a team player,
Yes,
but also, showcasing your individual talent.
exactly. And it's about doing it in a way that's authentic and genuine, not bragging or boastful.
He also talks about the importance of building your track record.
Yes, your track record is everything. It's the evidence of your competence.
Right.
It's your reputation. It's what speaks for you when you're not in the room.
And that's something you build over time
Over time, yeah.
through consistent effort, achievement exceeding expectations.
Exactly. And it's not about self-promotion. It's about letting your work speak for itself.
And speaking of things that can speak for themselves, let's talk about unlocking free training, which is a chapter in the book that I thought was really, really valuable.
Yeah, one of my favorites. It's amazing how many resources are out there for professional development that are often free or very low cost.
So it's about being resourceful, taking the initiative
Right.
to invest in your own growth and development.
Absolutely. And speaking of growth and development, let's revisit those 6 human needs.
Right.
We've talked about them a few times throughout our conversation, but it's always good to have that reminder.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fundamental concept that it's worth repeating.
Exactly. So just to recap, those 6 needs are certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, and contribution.
And as facility managers, we can actually influence these needs in the workplace.
Through the environments we create and the way we manage our teams.
For example, if you create a workspace that feels chaotic and unpredictable, that's going to create anxiety and uncertainty among your employees.
Makes sense.
But if you create a space that feels organized, efficient, and even inspiring,
Yes.
then people are going to feel more secure, which can then free them up to be more productive and more creative.
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment that supports not just the physical well-being of your employees, but also their emotional and psychological well-being.
Right. And speaking of being present and available, he has this really kind of counterintuitive piece of advice: meeting with everyone everywhere all the time.
Right. He's not literally suggesting that you should never leave your desk,
I was going to say.
but it's about being accessible, visible, and really making an effort to connect with your team and stakeholders on a regular basis.
So get out of the office,
Yeah.
walk around, talk to people, really be present in the workplace.
Exactly. It's about building relationships and getting a feel for what's happening on the ground.
And he also talks about the challenge of managing employees who might be what he calls high wage, low ambition.
Yes, that's a really interesting one.
So these are employees who are, financially comfortable,
Right.
but maybe they just lack the drive or the ambition to really excel in their roles.
And it's a good reminder that money isn't always the primary motivator for everyone.
So it's about finding those other ways to inspire and engage those employees.
Right.
helping them find that meaning and purpose in their work and creating those opportunities for growth and development.
It's about tapping into those intrinsic motivators.
Exactly. And speaking of finding meaning and purpose,
It all comes back to leadership. And that's the theme that I feel like runs throughout the whole book.
yeah, I noticed that too. He really elevates the role of the facility manager. It's not just someone who's, making sure the lights are working and the bathrooms are clean.
Exactly. He makes the case that facility managers are actually leaders who can have a huge impact not just on their teams, but on the entire organization.
Yeah.
They're the ones who create the environments where work happens.
Right. And those environments can either support or hinder success.
Exactly. It's like he says, the success of a company often hinges on the effectiveness of its facility management team.
I was thinking about this analogy of, in nature documentaries, they talk about keystone species,
Okay.
the species that plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance of an entire ecosystem.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And it made me think that facility managers are kind of like the keystone species of the workplace ecosystem.
I love that they really are because everything kind of flows through them.
Right. And that kind of ties in with another point he makes, which is knowing when to leave.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but sometimes it's necessary.
Right. He talks about recognizing when it's time to move on from a role or an organization, even if it's a difficult decision.
Sometimes change is necessary for growth, both for yourself and for the organization.
So it's being self-aware and recognizing when you might have reached the limits of what you can achieve in a particular role, or when your skills and passions might be better suited for something else.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to make that change, even if it feels uncomfortable in the short term.
He also has the section called Continuing Your Facility Management Odyssey.
Yeah.
What a great way to kind of frame the journey.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to think about it. It's a reminder that this is a field that's constantly evolving.
Right.
There's always something new to learn new challenges, to overcome new ways to make a positive impact.
It's about being a lifelong learner, being adaptable, and always striving for excellence.
Absolutely. It's about embracing that sense of adventure and exploration and recognizing that facility management is more than just a job, it's a calling.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Quantum Leap facility management, what are some of the key things that you hope our listeners will take away from our conversation today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that facility management is about so much more than just managing buildings.
Right.
It's about understanding people, creating spaces where they can thrive, fostering a culture of excellence and continuous improvement.
It's about being a leader, a visionary,
Yeah.
a problem solver, a force for positive change.
Exactly, and it's about embracing that quantum leap mentality,
Right.
constantly pushing yourself to learn, grow, make a difference.
And I hope our listeners will walk away from this episode feeling inspired to make even small quantum leaps in their own work and in their lives.
Me too, and I hope they'll remember that final thought-provoking question from the book.
Okay.
Are you working in your job or are you working on it?
It's such a good question.
It really makes you think.
It does.
So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for those quantum leaps.
Thanks for joining us today.